The Last of Us, this game is probably going to go down as one of my favorite games of all time, and probably as long as I'm playing video games. But I think we can all come to an agreement that The Last of Us Part 3 is an impossible trilogy at this point, with how much of a masterpiece the first game was, and how much the second game let the most of the community down. I think it's safe to say that The Last of Us Part 3 is too far out of reach. So, where do you go from here? Well, that question's kind of hard to answer. So, what do we know? Well, we know that there will be a third game. I do think it's important to take into account that the production on The Last of Us Part 2 went from 2014 to 2020, so we can expect that for The Last of Us 3, this will take at least just as long as it did for Part 2 to come out. So around the 6 to 7 year marker for Part 3. What about the story, you may ask? Who will we be playing as, and who will it be based around? Well, I have mixed opinions on this. It could still be based around Ellie, but at this point, I think it would be better just to start with a whole entire new cast and focus on somebody else. As much as I still would enjoy seeing Ellie as the main focus of the story, I just think after The Last of Us Part 2's performance with most of the community, it just wouldn't be best for the overall business and trilogy of the game. I think now's a good time to bring up the fact that personally, I don't mind The Last of Us Part 2. I probably enjoyed it almost as much as the first game. Although I do think that the first game was better with a storytelling element. The jump in gameplay with The Last of Us Part 2 was tremendous. I can't even begin to explain how much I enjoyed traversing the story, killing enemies with stealth, and using my head upon every single situation I was brought into. Not only that, but I love how this game doesn't bind you to one play style and make you play a certain way. You can pretty much approach any situation however you want. And yes, while it may be true that most of the time it's better to approach a situation using stealth, if you wanted to pull out a gun and go berserk, you could do that and still complete the level. Playing the first game and the second game made me want to get a PS4 of my own. Although I did complete both of the games while at a friend's house on his console, this game definitely made me consider picking up a PS4 as a mainly Xbox player, as crazy as that may sound. Now I'm sure I'm missing several points on how good the gameplay is in this game, but this isn't a review video, although I will probably make one later down the road. But from here on out, I think Ellie's story is over, and Ellie and Joel's story ended at the beginning of The Last of Us Part 2. And can we talk about that for a minute? Joel's death is just...
Joel, please get up! No!
Yep, that's right. A fucking golf club. The problem with this isn't even that Joel died. It's how they executed his death. How they executed it is just honestly pretty laughable. In all the scenes in The Last of Us Part 2 that were supposed to make you feel emotional and attached to the characters were obviously a far cry from the first game, with the exception of the flashbacks. Which I have to admit, the flashbacks in this game were probably one of the most enjoyable parts of The Last of Us Part 2 aside from the gameplay. I do think it is important to mention, even for the players that did hate The Last of Us Part 2 and loved The Last of Us Part 1, which is the majority of the player base, should be looking out for The Last of Us factions too. With factions on The Last of Us Part 1 being mildly successful, you could expect the same result from a game with better gameplay. Back to the story element of the game, there are so many disconnected characters from certain parts of the story, for example like Isaac, and I do think Isaac has potential to reappear in the third game if they choose to keep following Abby and Ellie's story. I'll also probably be making another video on the topic of what they could do for The Last of Us Part 3 if they wanted to keep following Ellie and Abby's story. A lot of people do have problems with what the meaning of the story is in this game, but personally, as corny as it may sound, I do like the message that this game tries to send. Because by the end of the story, I think the players started to realize that Ellie pushed everybody away in her bloodlust quest for revenge against Abby, ultimately leaving her with her worst fear, ending up alone.